आज का भारत सिर्फ आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा, भारत खुद को नेक्स्ट लेवल पर ले जा रहा है.
Together with my friend Prime Minister Modi, who I was pleased to see again last night, we took on our bilateral relationship and raised it to its highest level ever.
We need new answers. That's why we are coming to India.
And as a citizen of Nepal, India's closest neighbor, I feel a deep sense of pride and optimism seeing this strike.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report here on NewsX World. Let's first take a look at the top stories leading this hour. Starting in West Asia, where US forces have shot down 4 Iranian drones and struck a launch unit near the Strait of Hormuz, as Washington describes the operation as defensive. Iran has since targeted the base from which the strikes were launched, as efforts to finalize a peace deal between the two sides stall. This comes as Washington and Tehran are reported to be close to a memorandum of understanding that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz under a ceasefire framework. President Trump, however, warns Washington is not yet satisfied with the deal, adding the US will otherwise, in his words, finish the job. Israel has begun bombing the southern Lebanese city of Tyre and ordered the mass evacuation of the surrounding area, declaring all territory south of the Sorani River a combat zone. The death toll from Israeli strikes across Lebanon since March has now exceeded 200 people. Over in Europe, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Sweden today, where Stockholm is expected to announce the donation of JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets to Kyiv. Both sides are also set to begin negotiations on the future sale of the more advanced Gripen E variant to be financed through EU loan funding. In Africa, at least 16 students have been killed and 79 injured in an overnight dormitory fire at Utumishi Girls' School in central Kenya. Education Minister Julius Ogamba says authorities will investigate whether fire safety procedures were followed, as the cause remains unestablished. Back in Europe, the UK has recorded its hottest May Day ever at 34.8 degrees Celsius as a heat dome drives temperatures up 15 degrees above normal across Western Europe. France has also broken its May record, with authorities reporting at least 7 heat-related deaths across the continent. In other news, US Southern Command has carried out a lethal strike on a suspected drug trafficking vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 1 alleged narco-terrorist. The operation is part of a broader campaign targeting cartel-linked networks across Latin America. Finally, the United Nations has urged Europe to accelerate its shift away from fossil fuels as the continent swelters under record May temperatures. Analysts say Europe's renewable capacity has already saved an estimated €3 billion in March alone by reducing demand for gas imports. Those are your top stories for the hour. We continue our coverage on the West Asia war with some breaking news. The US military personnel that is deployed in active conflict zones are being targeted using commercially available location data, according to a new disclosure linked to the Pentagon and US Central Command. A letter shared by lawmakers and reviewed by Reuters says adversaries have exploited data from the global advertising and tracking ecosystem to identify troop locations and movement patterns. The US Central Command reportedly warned that such information can reveal where troops gather and how they operate, potentially enabling attacks using drones, missiles, or other weapons. Lawmakers in the United States say this marks the first official confirmation that commercial data streams have been used to target American forces in an active war zone, raising major concerns about digital surveillance risks. The disclosure has triggered calls in Washington for tighter restrictions on location sharing, disabling advertising identifiers on devices, and reducing reliance on consumer technology platforms in military environments. We now move on from that breaking news and over to West Asia, where Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps says it has targeted a US airbase in response to an early morning American strike near Bandar Abbas Airport, escalating already fragile tensions between Tehran and Washington. According to Iran's Tasnim news agency, the strike was carried out at 4:50 a.m. local time, following what it described as US military action against Iranian drone infrastructure in southern Iran. The US has said its forces intercepted Iranian one-way attack drones over the Strait of Hormuz and struck a ground control site in Bandar Abbas that was preparing to launch further drones. A US official described the actions as defensive and aimed at protecting commercial shipping and American personnel in the region. Iran confirmed the retaliation but did not disclose the location of the airbase it claims to have targeted. Meanwhile, Kuwait reported intercepting hostile missile and drone threats but did not attribute them to any specific actor. Joining us now in this discussion is Lev Iran. He's a Middle East commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Alison Mutler also joins us. She is the former Associated Press bureau chief. She joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much for joining us, both of you. It's a great pleasure to have you. Mr. Iran, I want to start with you. A ceasefire somehow is still in place, as fragile as it may be. Now, what is the red line here that will, of course, lead to this ceasefire falling apart? We have seen diplomacy now and the prospects of a peace deal, through emerging reports that this was very close, fall through. So what is going to be the final straw for hostilities to break out once again?
Thank you for having me. Both sides, the Americans and the Iranians, they don't have many new tools in their toolbox. And therefore, we still see the ceasefire between Iran and the United States. Once you see the Iranians again attacking Israel, this will be the end of the ceasefire. But the fact that we see that between Iran and Israel, it is still quiet. It is a manifestation that for Iranians, the appetite to break the ceasefire is not very large right now.
Alison, moving to you now. Of course, we had news that the Americans had Iran once again, aiming for the Bandar Abbas port, which of course is the second time it's been struck following this ceasefire. What are your thoughts on the latest developments, the strikes and the retaliation from Iran, which of course was intercepted by these air defences in Kuwait?
Well, I think Kuwait, in the first place, it does not want this conflict to spiral even more out of control. So they are doing what they can to defend their country, but they don't want to it to escalate. It's not in the interest of any of the Gulf nations. As you said, this ceasefire is very fragile, and both sides, Iran and the United States, don't trust each other, and they're probably right not to. So they're both sort of treading lightly. If you launch a missile, we'll launch one back. As you said, the US Treasury has sanctioned the Straits of Hormuz, and that's to put their sort of authority, maritime authority, that is to put extra economic pressure on Iran. Again, it won't break Iran, but it wants to make things as unpleasant as it can for the regime in Tehran. But I see, as you said, a very fragile ceasefire, and I see two sides not trusting each other. And I also see the Gulf nations, because it's really hitting them quite badly. Tourism, economy, reputation, if you like. It's not good, pitting neighbours against neighbours. And they have no interest in this escalating. They want to go, their interest is to live in a peaceful region, which is not possible at the moment. And obviously Donald Trump has to come up with statements, because the war is very unpopular. His lowest popularity ever, I think, since taking office. He has to come up with statements saying that we're about to reach an agreement. He has to come up with good news. Whereas the Iranians, doesn't really matter, because it's an autocratic regime and they can do what they want. They don't have to worry about public opinion.
Indeed. Mr. Aran, I want to come back to you once again. In terms of the political pressure that's on Donald Trump currently, how much does he need that peace deal as of now? He said previously, just within the last couple of days, that he doesn't care about the upcoming midterms. However, in reality, how much pressure is that is building upon Donald Trump to end this conflict? And surely the American people, after that prospects of a ceasefire, will not be best pleased with this development.
This war is not very popular in the United States, and doesn't matter what Trump says. He wants to soft pedal what many Americans see as really as a disaster in Iran. So in this sense, he needs an agreement. But if the agreement is nightmarish for him, if it looks like Iranians won the war against the United States, maybe it is better for him to wait until the summer and hope that once Iranians have, no gas, no electricity.
Okay, Mr. Aran, hopefully we get you back soon. Alison, do stay with us. We're now turning over to our next story. Some related developments coming out of the United States. Persian Gulf Strait Authority, a body overseeing shipping through the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Washington says the authority is part of an Iranian effort to control and monetize maritime traffic through one of the world's most critical oil transit routes. Officials allege it is linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard and is effectively used to impose illegal tolls on commercial vessels. The US Treasury warns that any company engaging with the body, including paying fees, could face sanctions exposure. The move also comes amid escalating tensions in the Gulf, where Washington has increased economic pressure alongside its military posturing. The US says that this is part of its broader maximum pressure strategy aimed at cutting off funding channels for Tehran. Iran has defended its actions as regulatory control over its waters, while global shipping firms are now caught in rising uncertainty over passage through the choke point that handles nearly a fifth of global oil flows. Analysts warn the situation could further disrupt energy markets and raise insurance and freight costs worldwide. Moving back to you, Alison. Let's look at the situation prior to the war. Of course, the Strait of Hormuz was freely navigated. Are we now going to look at a world following this conflict, if a peace deal is eventually agreed to, that Iran now has this new point of leverage, of course, one that it's not going to let go of, one that it now sees as easily applicable to one of the world's most critical choke points and has global implications?
Yes. You're right. And in a way, the United States is right. Iran is trying to get economic leverage over this, and it's a newly set up, from what I understand, authority. And in this war, the US is right to consider it something linked to the Iranian regime, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And as I said a little earlier, they're applying all the pressure they can to make things as difficult as possible for Iran. What effect it will have, how soon they will crack is another matter. But of course, Iran is trying to come out of this war stronger, and they have the geographical advantage because the Strait of Hormuz is right next to them, and so they're controlling it. And they are probably demanding taxes for passage because it's a global problem. I just need to walk on the street and see the prices of the petrol pumps. And it's normal that they would do that. So the US is taking all the measures it can to intervene and to stop that, because as you said before, there was a free passage. Now Iran is leaving this quite in its own national interest in their own favor, and the US is trying to stimulate that, to curb that, to make sure that Iran can't profit. And of course it can't do it entirely, but it is taking what steps that it can. It doesn't recognize this new Persian authority, whatever it's called, Persian Hormuz Strait Authority. It doesn't recognize it. And it doesn't want Iran to profit any more from this war. It wants to weaken Iran, and that's what it's trying to do.
Mr. Aran, coming back to you, in terms of Iran and its newfound leverage, how on earth did Donald Trump not know that this was going to happen? The blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, which has now been blocked for over 2 months, economic disruptions are felt worldwide, in order for Donald Trump to continue striking Iran. Surely Iran has the most leverage when it comes to these talks, and Donald Trump is dismissing it.
Donald Trump will never say it, but I'm not sure he's very happy enter this war. In this sense, I believe that we have some kind of a consensus here in the panel. In hindsight, Donald Trump maybe won't even start the war. And if he started, he would do what he does now without any war, only blocking Hormuz, without like a true war, like he had in the first, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks, which did not bring the fruits that he wanted to see. So in a way, I don't think any of us is surprised that Trump is not very predictable, not very even predictable for himself. And he believed that Iran is like Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, like a country with a weak army and weak nationality and so on. And he witnessed that Iran, even with only 35% of people who really like this regime, still they are strong enough to have a war with the Americans, not to give up. But again, if Trump keeps the war till, let's say, July, August, also Iran will have a big, big problem.
Mr. Aran, I want to stay with you. In terms of the regime itself, of course, has it not proved its resilience? The supreme leader was killed on the first day, but the Islamic Republic, as we know it, hasn't fallen. Is it even a fear that they come out of this conflict more emboldened, more radical than before? Mr. Aran, I'm staying with you for this question. Are you on? Okay. Right. Alison, moving over to you for that one. Is it a fear that the Islamic Republic and its regime, the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is more emboldened along with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps?
Well, even if they aren't, they will appear to be. As I said, they have the huge geographic advantage because it's being fought on their territory, whereas it's okay. Israel is part of this and they're next door, but the United States is many, many thousands of miles or kilometers away. And also, Iran has help unofficially from China and Russia, and that's very helpful. So even if they are feeling the effects on their economy, even politically, and there is problems inside the country, they will do their best to pretend they don't have that. And because it's not it's a dictatorship, that's actually in their advantage, because that means, first of all, there aren't international journalists there covering it. and probably not, perhaps the Red Cross or the Red Crescent is there. There's not. They control the information flow. So, as Lev said earlier, they will begin to crack by October. Here, he may know more of the actual infrastructure within Iran and what problems they face. But they are far more resilient in some ways than the United States, because they're also used to wars. It sounds a terrible thing to say, but they are used to wars. They had the 10-year war with Iraq. And they're used to they're people, I hate to say, but they're used to suffering, and they can put up with a lot. Whereas in a democracy that the United States is, however imperfect its democracy is, people, one of the reasons that Trump was voted, because they didn't want these never ever wars, and they didn't want to be dragged into any, that are so far away. A lot of people can't even place Iran perhaps on a map. So, Donald Trump, whether he says he doesn't care about the midterms or not, he's under much more pressure. The Iranian leadership has absolutely no pressure, because they control. It's a dictatorship, and they openly shoot their people, and we don't even know the numbers of people that have died, because they control everything there.
Moving back to you, Mr. Iran. Hopefully we have you back now. Apologies about those network issues. In terms of the feeling in Israel, of course, the Americans and the Israelis went into this conflict together with particularly an assumption from the Americans that these calculated strikes and killing the Ayatollah Khamenei would see the Islamic regime toppled, following the momentum and the seemingly huge support from the Iranian people and those protests back in January. We find ourselves now in an extremely different position. We now find ourselves where Iran has a new supreme leader. It is impacting the global economy with the Strait of Hormuz, as well as this new proposed tolling system in which it has the ability to toll 1/5 of the world's oil and the transit of it. Are you concerned? And what is Israel's feeling about Donald Trump's reluctance to get back into conflict, to leave that Islamic regime still in charge, and perhaps make a peace deal with it? Do you think it's going to be more emboldened than it was prior to the outbreak of this conflict?
Israel is the junior partner in this war, and Israel will have to comply to each and every step that Trump will take or decide.
And in terms of Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, there's elections coming up later on this year. How is this conflict impacting Likud, the prospects of Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid's coalition? What's the sort of conversation that's going on regarding those ceasefire developments, but also, and the prospect of a ceasefire, but also the closure of the Strait of Hormuz?
Bearing one pollster who also belonged to the right-wing establishment, all other pollsters show that Benjamin Netanyahu will lose the next elections. Also because of the war in Iran.
So I'm just trying to get more of a picture. Is it not clear? Does the Israeli public, are they pleased with how this conflict has gone? Do they want fighting to resume? In an ideal world, of course, as you've said, Israel is the junior partner in this war. In the real world, what would the Israelis, like the coalition of the United States and Israel, to undertake?
We cannot put Israelis and Americans in the same page, because for Israelis, whether they're like left-wing or right-wing, religious or secular, never mind. For them, Iran decided that Israel cannot exist. So for them, even if Iran, after the war, will have, let's say, only 70% of the capabilities that they had, or 60%, still it is better than the situation that we had 1 year back. While in America, you will not even find 24 Americans that really believe that Iran is a real threat for America. So Israelis and Americans are simply not on the same page psychologically as far as this war is concerned.
And what does that say about the state of this conflict? Surely the coalition that is fighting against I mean, let's face it, one of the great powers in the Middle East, a country of 90 million people, one of the most powerful militaries inside the Middle East. Surely those two minds need to be aligned.
Yeah, they should, but we see what happens in the real world. Look, in Israel, people had the fantasy, and in America, that we will have like a European liberal democracy in Iran, because we saw all these demonstrations, okay? So now it is like crystal clear that the best thing that Americans or Israel can get is a weakened Iran, and not that in Iran, the regime will collapse in the next few months. But again, here we also can be surprised, because like say 35 years ago, who could believe that the Securitate will like collapse in Romania, okay? In a way, you never know when people will be brave enough to go to the street and brush aside a regime that they hate. In this sense, Israel and America were wrong, but maybe 1 year from now, we will see good news. This one, we cannot know.
Okay, Alison, coming back to you, another key point in these negotiations is, of course, Iran's nuclear program. According to reports, which are seen as widely credible, Iran has around 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, up to 60%. Just for the viewers, it takes around 90% to become weapons grade. Donald Trump and the Israelis want that handed over to the Americans and destroyed. Donald Trump continues to hit that phrase button of Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Which issue is more of an importance now to the Americans, do you think? The opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which of course has economic bite in America as well as the rest of the world, or that idea that Iran can never develop a nuclear weapon, which is, by the way, what Iran has categorically denied doing so prior to this conflict?
Well, both objectives are very important for Washington, for Donald Trump, but obviously in terms of getting votes and in terms of the pain felt around the world, the most important thing is unblocking the Strait of Hormuz, because that's what is called the hike in petrol prices, gasoline prices around the world, not just in every country. And, when you have raised fuel prices, that fuels inflation. And that hits everyone in the pockets. So that's the best thing for everyone around the world. Whereas me sitting here in Bucharest, the idea about the enriched uranium and one day they might have a bomb, potentially it's not a good thing, but most people are more concerned about the cost of living. And obviously we don't have all the intelligence on how far along. I mean, there's all kinds of reports how far along Iran is, and of course it denies that it wants to make a nuclear bomb. But why is it doing what it's doing? Why do they have 440 kilograms, as your report said, that 60% enriched? 60% enriched? It's because they are, as you said, it's a major power in the Middle East, and if they have a nuclear bomb, they are even more fearsome. They are even more important. I mean, a nuclear weapon makes them much more important. That's why everybody worries about Putin, and he starts rattling on about he's going to use a nuclear weapon. Well, like a country like Romania couldn't. There aren't that many nuclear, but if you do have a nuclear weapon, it makes you a force to be reckoned with in the world. It makes you, a major power in some ways, militarily and defense-wise. And that, I imagine, is why Iran wants one. But that kind of regime is never going to admit, we're trying to build a nuclear bomb, because you have the Western nations which are trying to stop them doing it. And this is a regime that thrives on lies. You don't believe anything they say. I'm not saying that other regimes or governments don't lie, but you wouldn't expect them to say, yes, we're actually going to be transparent, we're developing a nuclear bomb, and we hope in N months or years we will get to that stage. No, they want to become more important, more strategic, and more feared, both regionally and in the world, and that's why they're making a nuclear bomb. But for the average person anywhere in the world, what counts is, how much fuel cost. I was talking to two friends today, and they said that they're both selling their cars because they run on gasoline, and it's too expensive. So, and they want to buy electric cars. So it does. The prices of petrol affects everyone, and that is. In terms of votes, of course, Donald Trump cares about his popularity, whatever he says, or the midterms. In terms of votes, that is the most important thing: is to sort out the Strait of Hormuz.
Miss Alison Mutler and Mr. Leveran, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you here on the broadcast. We stay now in West Asia for our next update and move over to Lebanon, where tensions are once again escalating in the south of the country, despite a fragile US-brokered ceasefire remaining officially in place. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 11 people, including 2 children, were killed and 21 others injured in fresh Israeli airstrikes carried out early this morning across southern parts of the country. According to officials, a strike in the town of Adloun in Sidon district targeted a vehicle, killing 6 members of the same family, including a mother, father, and their 2 children. In a separate strike in a residential building in the city of Sidon, 5 people, including 2 women, were killed, while 21 others were wounded, among them 5 children once again. The Israeli military says the strikes were aimed at Hezbollah infrastructure and followed evacuation warnings issued for several southern Lebanese areas, including Tyre and Nabatea. Thousands of residents have reportedly fled towards Beirut and other northern locations as fears of wider conflict continue to grow. The incidents and its violence comes amid increasing cross-border tensions and repeated violations of the ceasefire agreement. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Stay tuned on NewsX World for more international news updates.